as his coming in was a surprise. Then some personally bad things happened to him, Navika. If you think about it, the book, The Accidental Prime Minister. How many, is it ethical for any of us to work with someone and then to write a tell-all book about a prime minister? That happened to him. And that book was later made into it is completely unethical. I've had conversations with people I maybe had loggerheads with, but it was done in the case of that particular book, and that tormented him a lot. And so a lot of things like Manmohan Singh was a professional, an economist, also, and he was all those things. He was highly educated, he knew his economics, but there was this problem in there is this situation always in the Congress party that the family is first. And yes, I'm glad Sheila mentioned that point, that the reason why he was chosen is because there's no law in India that a person born in a foreign country cannot become prime minister. There is, by the way, a law in the US. So, for instance, Elon Musk, I think he was born in South Africa. I don't think he can become the next president after Donald Trump, seeing how active he is. There was no law, but it was definitely an issue. So, in the US has a law that you have to be born in America to contest the president for the office of president. We didn't have that law, but there was this public issue. That's why Sharad Pawar left, and that's why Manmohan Singh was selected. Very clearly, he was not elected. In the second term, when the Congress comes back with more seats, we are still very much in the coalition era. It's been a really good term with him at the helm of affairs, and then, but the second term is just blown apart very quickly. And that is why we have this impression, it just blowing, and in all fairness, this man, who I know that when his daughters and all got married, before one of them, before he became prime minister, the simplest, in their own personal space, they are the simplest people, and so this man was suddenly, a lot of the charges of corruption were being invisibly within the party. It was as if the PM is responsible and nobody else, He was also being made into a fall guy. All of this politics was happening around him. So he was really a gentleman prime minister, beyond all of these stories that we covered day to day, and we all had it. He was a good human being. He did the best he could for the country. He just lived in a time where, but this is what happened. His second term was a change making.
Absolutely. The way you put it, and Sanjay Jha, isn't that quite right? 2004 to 2009, he was a prime minister who was selected. He went through with the nuclear deal. Nobody thought a nuclear deal kind of an issue would ever get him votes. But the fact that he stood his ground, the fact that it was passed, the Congress party came back with more number of seats. From 145 in 2004, they went up to 206 seats in Lok Sabha. And many thought that, it was all entirely Dr. Manmohan Singh's doing, the manner in which he governed the country. But the way it was frittered away, that opportunity was frittered away because controversies peaked one after another, and then this whole larger-than-life Gandhi's image versus the Prime Minister, how far he could go. It was actually, the second term was a nightmare, despite the fact that he got that second term on the back of some of the good work that he did in the first term. Tad unfair to him, and for the Congress party to look outside for the detractors of Dr. Manmohan Singh. Do you think there is an opportunity for them to look within as well?
Yeah. Navika, good evening, and to all my very distinguished fellow panelists. I need to start by first telling you that I completely agree with every word that Suhail has said about Dr. Singh. I can tell you, I don't know how well he knew him, how many times he met him, but I think his assessment of Dr. Singh is absolutely brilliant and to the point. And I couldn't but agree entirely with what he said. I want to make a point here, Navika, that the 2009 Lok Sabha election, where the Congress jumped from 145 to 206 seats, which today looks like an unthinkable fantasy, happened because it was spectacular perception of Dr. Singh for taking bold decisions. The RTI became a big talking point, transparency for the first time in looking at government affairs, et cetera, et cetera. I think these were, frankly, the Congress party. I know many people were reluctant to give him full credit, but the truth is it was Dr. Singh's victory entirely. And of course, it's a teamwork, but he was the lodestar for that triumph. Now, let me add to what Suhail mentioned in particular. I agree with Suhail completely that everything that he did, his accomplishments, his achievements are in the public domain. I was lucky to have a few interactions with him. I live in Mumbai, so I used to miss a lot of these functions in Delhi where I could not really interface with him at short notice. But I can tell you that an exceptionally wonderful, soft-spoken human being. And at some point, I'll probably write a piece on my last meeting with him, which is too poignant for me to perhaps share. It's an emotional moment, and it happened when he was feeling rather weak about some situations around him, but maybe I'll save it for another day. But I want to make 2 points here that I think Dr. Singh needs to be given full credit for. The 1991 reforms, I'm putting that aside. I think the whole world knows about that. But, during that 2004 to 14 period, Navika, you and I are both Gokhale students, the Great Recession, the mortgage crisis that hit America and ravaged a large part of Europe and different banks globally, and we somehow insulated ourselves. It came at a cost, right? There was a fiscal stimulus and it ran into a high inflation. These are things of an economic cycle when you overinvest and you make a heated economy. But the truth is that we survived the Great Recession. And we, during that 10-year period, grew at 7.8% GDP on an old GDP weightage, and lifted nearly 270 million people out of poverty, the second below China, which brings me to the core credo that India needs to be inspired by. I remember the conversation we used to have, and I think Suhail will remember that, reforms with a human face. Today we call it compassionate capitalism or responsible capitalism. But I think you see in that GDP growth and the lifting of people out of poverty, the real India story. That you can have private capital, you can have good industry, we should have foreign direct investment, there should be liberalization, there should be privatization, and we should not be scared of actually being more open and liberal with more private capital. Yet at the same time, to recognize that the bottom of the pyramid needs to be lifted up. The India story will be incomplete without recognizing that reality. So I think he merged what we call as neoliberal economics with also the hard necessity to invest in welfare and subsidies. I think that is his remarkable triumph story. And the second is, if you look at Aadhaar, GST, and the direct benefits transfer, the three things that I think Mr. Modi's government has tried hard to implement, and I think they have done reasonably well. But the architecture for these three were really built during Dr. Manmohan Singh's time. And I think there is the vision of Dr. Manmohan Singh that we need to recognize. He was bringing into distribution and economic governance technocratic infrastructure. He was building into it the use of modern digital technologies that resulted in the Jan Dhan accounts and so on and so forth. So very early you saw Aadhaar, DBT and GST talking about greater transparency, more use of tech, and becoming more digital and widely accessible to the common man. So that is the vision of Dr. Singh. And honestly, when I heard about him last night, I kind of remembered the last time I met him. And you just kind of, I just regret one thing, because it kept coming at the back of my mind for the last year, for example, that the next time I go to Delhi, I must meet him. He's getting on in age and so forth. I didn't do it. And I say in life, you have your regrets. But I guess that's also a reality I need to accept.
Very, very well put, very succinctly put. And Sanjay Jha, one of the rare occasions when you agree in toto with Suhail Seth. But yes, talking about Dr. Manmohan Singh is one of those moments in life. And